Hollywood didn't just idolize Marilyn Monroe, it tried to create dozens of copycats of her. These copycats tried to look like her, move like her, and many of them paid a disturbing price. Why did so many women risk their careers, identities, and even their sanity to live in Monroe's shadow? And what happened to them when Hollywood moved on? In this video, we're diving into the rise, fall, and forgotten fame of Monroe's most devoted copycats. Jayne Mansfield. The first copycat was louder, flashier, and more daring than Marilyn Monroe. She turned imitation into a performance art of its own. She is Jayne Mansfield. Jayne Mansfield was a knowledgeable woman. Born Vera Jane Palmer in 1933, she was brilliant, reportedly with an IQ of 163. She studied acting and knew exactly what Hollywood wanted, a blonde bombshell, so she dyed her hair platinum and built a figure to rival Marilyn Monroe's iconic curves. Jayne had the sexuality, the voice, and the charisma, but she was louder, bolder, even more overt. Studios branded her as a sex symbol to rival Monroe's delicate mystique. She starred in hits like The Girl Can't Help It and Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, and paraded her body in promotional stunts. But where Monroe carried a haunting vulnerability beneath the glamour, Jayne's persona was all showmanship. She studied the art, knew the business, and did exactly what she had to do. From pushing the envelope with staged wardrobe malfunctions to scandalous publicity acts, she did it all. Some might even say she was trying too hard to outshine Marilyn. As Monroe's star remained untouchable, Mansfield was always second best. The spotlight shifted, roles grew scarce, and desperation set in. Rumors swirled, she flirted with Satanism, staged public fights, and clung to fame with tabloid theatrics. Yet the money ran out, and the starlets who outshone her left Jayne isolated. The crash that ended Jayne Mansfield's life was one of the most gruesome in Hollywood history. On June 29, 1967, tragedy struck. Driving on a highway in Louisiana, Mansfield's car slammed into the back of a tractor-trailer. The collision was horrific and caused fatal head injuries, including a crushed skull. She was only 34. Jayne died instantly, leaving behind 3 young children. Contrary to some news reports at the time, Jayne's head was not severed. This misconception arose because a wig was thrown from the vehicle and mistaken for her head. This tragic incident also spurred important safety reforms, including the introduction of mandatory rear underride guards on trucks to prevent vehicles from sliding under trailers in collisions. A life cut short, and a legacy forever entwined with caution and loss. Jayne's death was a cruel punctuation mark on a life spent chasing a dream that ultimately consumed her. A tragic and violent reminder that beneath the glamour, these women were mortal and fragile. Nicole Smith. Well, Jayne's story ended in a flash, but decades later, a new icon would follow a sadder path down the same road. Nicole Smith worshipped Marilyn Monroe and became her in all the worst ways. Her life was a surreal fairy tale, poisoned by fame, addiction, and heartbreak. Born Vicki Lynn Hogan in Texas, Nicole Smith was a high school dropout working at a fried chicken joint before she made her way into the world of strip clubs and modeling. She idolized Marilyn Monroe obsessively and even had a tattoo of her smiling face. In 1992, her life changed when she was crowned Playboy's Playmate of the Year. Almost overnight, she was being called the new Marilyn Monroe, not just for her blonde bombshell looks, but her flirtatious baby voice, breathy persona, and tragic vulnerability. She modeled for Guess jeans, channeling Monroe's famous curves and old Hollywood poses in black and white campaigns that made her instantly recognizable. Her rise was meteoric. In 1994, she married J. Howard Marshall, a billionaire oil tycoon 63 years her senior. Tabloids went into a frenzy. She insisted it was love, but most of the world didn't believe her. The marriage sparked a scandal that never truly faded. Marshall died just a year later, and Nicole spent the rest of her life embroiled in legal battles over his estate. The case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. In the meantime, she tried to launch an acting career. She appeared in The Hudsucker Proxy, Naked Gun 33 1/3, and a string of low-budget films. Her acting was mocked, and her weight fluctuations and erratic behavior became late-night punchlines. In 2002, she leaned into reality television with The Nicole Show. The show was a hit, but for all the wrong reasons. She was no longer being styled as Marilyn, she was being humiliated like a cautionary tale. Behind the scenes, she struggled with addiction, body image issues, and mental health. The pressure of fame and the Monroe comparison seemed to crush her. Then came the worst blow. In 2006, her 20-year-old son Daniel died of a drug overdose while visiting her in the hospital just days after she gave birth to her daughter. Anna spiraled even deeper. Anna Nicole Smith died alone in a Florida hotel room, surrounded by pills. She was only 34. Her death was ruled an accidental overdose, but the desperation was clear. A woman exhausted by heartbreak, addiction, and the crushing pressure of a public life scrutinized at every turn. Smith's final hours echoed Marilyn Monroe's tragic end decades before. The loss of her young son had devastated her spirit, and her attempts to hold on to love and fame dissolved into a tragic spiral. Anna's death served as a modern-day mirror to Marilyn's, a heartbreaking reminder of a life defined by beauty, tragedy, and the impossibility of truly escaping the spotlight's harsh glare. Dorothy Stratten. While Anna spiraled under the weight of fame, another woman barely got the chance to carry it. Dorothy Stratten had the look, the buzz, and she was crowned the new Marilyn. Dorothy Stratten was a Canadian teenager working at a Dairy Queen when she was discovered by Paul Snider, a Vancouver nightclub promoter and small-time hustler. Snider saw her beauty and convinced her to pose for nude photos, which he submitted to Playboy. She was selected as a centerfold and eventually became Playmate of the Year in 1980. With her soft voice, natural vulnerability, and understated sensuality, Dorothy caught the attention of Hollywood. She booked small TV roles and starred in the sci-fi parody Galaxina. Director Peter Bogdanovich saw her as a serious talent and cast her in They All Laughed, predicting she would become a true movie star. She was being called the new Marilyn, but her life was spiraling behind the scenes. Paul Snider wasn't just her manager, he was her husband. He was controlling, insecure, and became increasingly unhinged. Snider was known in Vancouver as a sleazy figure, nicknamed the Jewish pimp by some in his circle, who dressed flamboyantly and tried to live off women's earnings. After Dorothy's rise, he tried to follow her to Hollywood and cling to her fame. He bought her expensive outfits, posed as her agent, and often embarrassed her in front of producers. As Dorothy gained independence, especially when she fell in love with Peter Bogdanovich during filming, Snider's jealousy deepened. He felt her slipping away and began stalking her, even hiring a private investigator. She was trying to break free. He didn't let her. Dorothy Stratten's life was violently cut short by the man she once trusted most. After years of physical and emotional control, her husband's jealousy erupted into brutality. On a day that should have marked her triumph, Dorothy was SA'd, shot, and mutilated in a shocking act of rage and possession. Her body was found cold and broken, her bright future extinguished before it could even begin. She was only 20. The horror of her death sent ripples through Hollywood, exposing the dark side of fame and the dangers lurking behind the scenes. Dorothy's story is a brutal reminder of how vulnerable young women are when trapped by those who claim to love them, a chilling testament to beauty destroyed by violence. Barbara Payton. Dorothy's story ended with violence from someone she trusted. But for the next copycat, trust wasn't the problem. Reputation was. Barbara Payton had Monroe's look, but with a darker edge. A blue-eyed, peroxide blonde seductress who seemed to have it all. Barbara Payton was a rising star in the early 1950s, known for her roles in noir films like Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye opposite James Cagney. Her icy beauty and sultry voice got her noticed. Studios whispered she could be the next Monroe. But she was different, bolder, and reckless. Payton came from a troubled background in Texas, which gave her a natural edge. She wasn't just playing femme fatales, she was one. Her performances in films like Trapped, 1949, and Only the Valiant, 1951, were full of grit, giving her a persona that felt less like the soft, breathy innocence of Monroe and more like a ticking time bomb wrapped in silk and lipstick. Unlike Marilyn, Barbara didn't try to hide her sexuality or play naive. She pushed boundaries, both on screen and off. For a brief moment, it looked like she might be Hollywood's next golden girl. But her career would burn fast and end violently. Barbara's off-screen life quickly spiraled into chaos. She starred in hits like The Girl Can't Help It, Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, and paraded her body in promotional stunts. She was an alcoholic who partied hard and plunged headfirst into a toxic love triangle that destroyed her reputation. She was engaged to actor Franchot Tonnet, an established Hollywood name, but was sleeping with actor Tom Neal. When the truth came out, Neal brutally beat Tonet into a coma, fracturing his cheekbone and shattering his image. The fight made national headlines, and Barbara became the face of a scandal Hollywood couldn't forgive. Studios blacklisted her, directors refused to cast her, and soon the offers disappeared altogether. From there, the descent was fast and cruel. She married and divorced several times, was arrested for passing bad checks, and grew increasingly dependent on alcohol and barbiturates. By the early 1960s, she had gone from leading lady to public punchline, seen wandering Hollywood Boulevard barefoot, her once beautiful face swollen and scarred. Desperate and destitute, Barbara resorted to prostitution to survive, reportedly charging as little as $5 for sex. She was unrecognizable to those who had once admired her, her former glamour reduced to a ghost of what it once was. In 1963, she wrote a memoir titled I Am Not Ashamed, detailing her downfall in stark and painful detail. But the book didn't revive her career, it only confirmed her collapse. She died 4 years later in 1967 from heart and liver failure caused by years of alcohol abuse. She was just 39. No glamorous obituary, no funeral tributes from the studio heads who once called her a star. Just silence, and her haunting story was left behind. Barbara's death was not just the end of a life, it was the erasure of a star, a grim symbol of how Hollywood's ruthless machinery chewed up and discarded its own. Mamie Van Doren. Barbara's life unraveled in full view, scandal by scandal, headline by headline. But the next Monroe copycat didn't implode. Mamie Van Doren simply slipped through the cracks. Her figure and platinum curls were nearly identical to Marilyn's, making the comparison unavoidable. Studios didn't hesitate to market her as part of the blonde bombshell wave sweeping through Hollywood. She became part of the infamous 3M's trio: Marilyn Monroe, Mamie Van Doren, and Jane Mansfield, three curvaceous, vivacious blondes who captivated audiences and symbolized a particular brand of 1950s sex appeal. Mamie wasn't just a pretty face, though. She had a background in singing and dancing that added layers to her performances. Her musical numbers and rebellious roles gave her a vivacious energy that drew fans, especially younger audiences eager for something bold and different. She was groomed to be a starlet who could combine glamour with a hint of danger, a girl who could be both sweet and wild. But as the decade wore on, cracks began to show. Mamie had the look, the charisma, and the presence, but she didn't have the roles. While Marilyn was cast opposite top actors like Clark Gable and Laurence Olivier, Mamie was stuck in low-budget drive-in movies, often with scripts that reduced her to just eye candy. She was desperate to break out of the sex symbol cage. She wanted real parts, real respect. But the industry saw her as a Monroe knockoff, disposable and replaceable. She fought to stay relevant, but the offers stopped coming. In meetings, producers told her to be more like Marilyn. After Monroe's death, they told her she reminded them too much of her. She was trapped in a paradox. Too similar to Monroe to stand out, but too different to replace. No matter what Mamie did, she couldn't win. Even when she tried to reinvent herself, appearing in nightclubs, on television, and later in films, she was often met with indifference or typecasting. The girl who had once been touted as Marilyn Monroe's rival now struggled to keep her name in the conversation. Mamie never had a scandalous downfall, but she also never had a comeback. Still alive today, in her 90s, but her fame faded decades ago. She avoided tragedy, but she was erased all the same. She wasn't broken or forgotten because of scandal or tragedy. She was erased by time and shifting tastes. Sheree North. Mamie slipped through the cracks by accident. The next woman? She was built from the start to fill Marilyn's shoes, and nothing else. In the early 1950s, Marilyn Monroe was becoming unpredictable. She was missing shoots, fighting with studio heads and demanding more control over her scripts. That made executives at 20th Century Fox nervous. They needed a new plan, a replacement, someone who could mimic Monroe's magic if the original self-destructed. Enter Sheree North, blonde, buxom, and playful, trained in dance and musical theater. On paper, she had everything the studio needed to recreate their golden girl. She starred in films like How to Be Very, Very Popular and was cast in roles Monroe had turned down, including the girl in pink tights. Studio photographers were instructed to shoot her just like Marilyn, from the makeup to the gowns to the poses. They weren't selling Sheree, They were selling a silhouette that audiences already knew. Fox made it clear she wasn't there to become a star, she was there to replace one. But no matter how hard they tried, audiences could tell the difference. Sheree North wasn't Marilyn Monroe, and she wasn't allowed to be Sheree North either. She was frozen in a mold the public didn't want duplicated. They didn't fall in love or buy the illusion. Her films underperformed. Critics dismissed her as a copy, and instead of rebranding her, the studio quietly gave up. She had been cast in Monroe's shadow, and when the light shifted, she vanished with it. Behind the scenes, the rejection stung. Sheree had real talent, real training, and a spark all her own. But she was never allowed to explore it. Her Hollywood debut had been built on imitation, not authenticity, and it cost her the chance to make her own first impression. By the end of the 1950s, the studio had moved on. Monroe was still a legend, but Sheree? She was a footnote. But Sheree didn't disappear. She reinvented herself, not as a sex symbol, but as a character actress. She took smaller roles, grittier parts, and earned respect slowly and quietly over decades. She played sharp-tongued mothers, judges, and no-nonsense professionals in a string of TV hits like Seinfeld, Cheers, and Law & Order. She even made it back to the big screen in films like Charlie Varick and Man in the Moon. But the stardom she was once promised never returned. On November 4, 2005, aged 73, North died of complications following surgery. And her early career remained a haunting reminder of how Hollywood used and discarded her when she didn't meet impossible expectations. Diana Dors. Sheree North was built to be a carbon copy, manufactured, polished, and quietly discarded when the mold didn't hold. But across the ocean, another woman didn't wait to be chosen. Diana Dors declared herself the British Marilyn. In post-war Britain, audiences craved glamour. Hollywood had Monroe, so the UK needed its answer. And that answer came in the form of Diana Dors, a curvy blonde teenager with striking features, a sultry voice, and a talent for self-promotion. She trained at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, but the press quickly labeled her as Britain's blonde bombshell. She leaned into it, dazzling the tabloids with fur coats, champagne parties, and scandalous quotes. Her breakout role in Yield to the Night proved she could act, but her sex symbol image always overshadowed her craft. She even crossed over to Hollywood, appearing in films like The Unholy Wife and I Married a Woman. Studios saw her as a British import who could channel Monroe's erotic charm with a cheekier attitude. But where Marilyn was mysterious, Diana was brash. And in conservative post-war Britain, that didn't always play well. Behind the glamour, Diana's life was in turmoil. Her first marriage to businessman Dennis Hamilton was a disaster. He exploited her fame, pushed her into sleazy roles, and orchestrated risque publicity stunts that damaged her credibility. Under his influence, her life spiraled into a chaotic blur of sex scandals and tax investigations. She later revealed he had coerced her into hosting wild sex parties for powerful men and secretly filmed the gatherings to blackmail celebrities and politicians. Diana said she didn't know until it was too late. Her career faltered as the scandals mounted and the roles dried up. She struggled with weight gain, illness, and alcoholism. She attempted multiple reinventions with cabaret shows, talk shows, and even releasing a pop single. But the press mocked her rather than celebrating her resilience. Her final years were marked by a painful battle with cancer. Even as her body failed, she remained witty and unfiltered in interviews, refusing to be pitied. She died in 1984 at just 52. She left behind a legacy that British audiences still remember, not just for her beauty, but for her fire. They all tried to become Marilyn Monroe. Some aspired to be her, while some spent their entire life trying to run away from the persona. But what they became was a tragedy. Some were forgotten, some were destroyed, but none were ever truly seen. If you liked this video, make sure to watch the other videos on our channel about beautiful ladies of yesteryear.